In this video, you're going to see me giving advice to a new wholesale seller. So this particular guy, his name is Julian. He's a freshman in college, and he reached out to me via email about 6 months ago telling me he sells on Amazon, he wants to get into wholesale, and he asked if I can meet in person because he's located in my city. And so I told him, hey, I don't have time to meet you in person, but if you take action, if you implement what I say in my free content, I'd be more than happy to talk to you. He emails me about 6 months later saying, hey, I just placed my first wholesale order. So I wanted to get on Zoom with him and help give him some advice because he's one of the few people that I've told to take action that's actually done it. So here is the video of our conversation. I hope you guys can benefit from the insights that I gave him. Do me a favor and take a quick second, subscribe to my channel below for more videos just like this, and enjoy the conversation. All right, so I understand, let's see, you placed your first wholesale order recently, right? And then give me a background too. Were you starting with arbitrage? Is that right?
Yeah, so for a while, I pretty much just did online arbitrage, and then I'm still doing it now. Now I'm kind of trying to transition into wholesale, especially with kind of being in college. Like, you kind of want to trade money for time. So that's really what I'm trying to do right now. Just get the system down and really focus on other things.
Got you. Okay. And I know when you originally reached out, it was what, back in like May, I think, May or June. And
Yeah, I think so.
And I know you were like looking into wholesale at the time, right? You were kind of looking for some advice, and then what, a week or two ago, you emailed me and said, hey, I just placed my first wholesale order. So I guess give me some background into like, how did you get from, hey, I'm researching wholesale, I'm trying to figure it out, to, hey, I placed my first order? Because I think there's a ton of people that they're where you were back in May, right? And they're trying to get to where you are now.
Yeah, so for me, I'm kind of in a group right now where there's a lot of wholesalers, partially some OA guys, but mainly wholesalers. And so I kind of just networked with them. I have a really good friend who's like seriously into wholesale. So he and I always just kind of call, and just call over call and through your podcast, like just over time, I kind of learned about wholesale. And so he gave me a recommendation of a supplier, did a quick call up, gave them my EIN, they opened an account, and then I just kind of sat there all day, sometimes even during class, just kind of like sourcing their catalogs. And then eventually I found like a few items. I found like 4 or 5 that were pretty good, like 80% ROI, that's fantastic.
That's really good, yeah.
From what I've heard. And so, yeah, I just placed it, sent it to my prep center, and now it's off in the warehouses somewhere.
So has that checked in yet? Has it started selling, or it's still kind of getting checked in?
It hasn't checked in, I guess, because it's Q4 right now, so check-in times are pretty slow. But yeah, it's at Charlotte right now, actually, the CLT2 warehouse.
CLT2, yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. So that's awesome that you, like, again, people are going to be watching this. I think one of the big takeaways is the fact that you said you networked with other people that are already in the business, right? So I think that's that's a mistake that I made. Like, people that know my story probably know that I've been selling on Amazon for about six and a half years. And up until the end of my 5th year, like really last year around this time, I could count on one hand the number of other Amazon sellers that I knew personally. Like, I literally knew 3 or 4, and they didn't even live near me. So it sounds like you got plugged in with a really good group of people that it didn't even sound like they're starting out, right? Like you said, your friend is seriously into wholesale. Some other people are already doing the business at probably a high level. So how did you get in with those people? Because I think that's a big objection, again, that newer sellers have. It's like, oh, well, experienced sellers don't take me seriously, or how can I get them to want to share leads with me or share suppliers with me, right, if I don't have anything to bring to the table? So like, how did you insert yourself there?
Yeah, I think it's like a few things. Like, part of it is luck, because I think sometimes you just have to get lucky just trying to find one of those people that are like really willingly to like help you and really want to watch you grow. Mm-hmm. And I think another thing is like, I think I sort of disagree with you. Like, I don't really think you have to know tons of sellers, to be honest, to really grow. You just need one good guy, maybe 2 or 3 that are just willing to help you. Just build a really good relationship with them, and over time you just gain like little bits of knowledge, and it just really adds up. So, I mean, for me personally, like, I don't know like 20 Amazon sellers. Like, I think on a daily basis, the guys that really taught me, I know like 2 or 3. And so I'm just kind of rolling with them. We're both really good buddies. We FaceTime all the time. We call. One of them actually preps my stuff for me. Like, that's just how close we are. So.
Well, I think there's a point to be made there, right? I mean, I preach this all the time in my content, like quality over quantity when it comes to your suppliers, when it comes to the products that you carry, when it comes to everything, right? So, and you're kind of echoing that point. You're saying like, hey, I don't necessarily need, a huge group of Amazon sellers that are all crushing it. It's just, I just need 1 or 2 guys that I really resonate with that can kind of help pull me up from where I am. So it sounds like that's kind of exactly what you have with this person.
Yeah.
And so you were talking, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was about to say it's sort of the same with you, because I was, as I'm listening to your podcast, you were saying, excuse me, you were saying you only have about 4 or 5 suppliers. Is that right? That you kind of really mainly work with. So same exact thing.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I mean, again, I personally think it's easier to scale a big wholesale business with like 3 to 6 solid main suppliers that you can buy from on a regular basis. I think it's way harder to scale with, 10, 15, 20 suppliers, because if you're working with that many suppliers, like unless you're just an 8-figure seller that's doing really big numbers, it's going to be hard. Like you're probably going to be placing more small orders as opposed to fewer big orders, right? Like I would much rather place, let's say 4 $25,000 orders for a total of 100K than let's say 10K orders, right? It's going to be easier to manage fewer orders. You're going to be able to go deeper with those 4 suppliers. So they're going to most likely give you better pricing in the future. Like there's just a lot of benefits that come from quality over quantity, right?
Yeah, exactly. I agree with you there.
And so you were talking about how you'd be sitting in class, you're just putting in the work, right? Going through that catalog to find those 4 or 5 products. And so again, I think this is a lesson for people listening. People will get these price lists from distributors in particular, and they're like, oh, well, it's got 10,000 lines, right? How am I supposed to find anything? I went through the first 2,000 products. I didn't find anything. But you're telling me that you went through a big list, and I mean, it was probably multiple thousand products deep to pick out 4 or 5 that were really good. So probably like 1%, if not less than 1% of the products that you looked at, you ended up moving forward with. Is that right?
Yeah, it wasn't a few thousand. I think it was about 2-ish thousand. But the thing is like when it comes to sourcing, like you kind of know what's good and what's not. So a lot of it got skipped over. I think if we're talking about like strictly manual sourcing, like highlighting it and everything, it was probably around a quarter of it, because a lot of it I just knew, like, if I don't really recognize the brand, I'm going to skip over it. I mean, I'll check out a few, see if it's the right brand for me or not. And if I don't really see it coming up on Amazon, I kind of just tend to skip over it, just really filtering out as much as I can. And I'm new. That might be the wrong thing to do. Maybe you should just go line by line by line, but that's just what I did.
No, I mean, I think you took the right approach. I think that the key, especially when you're working with a price list like that, is like disqualify as quickly as possible. So in that price list, first of all, was it in Excel format? Like, did it come in a spreadsheet, I assume?
Yeah, it came in a spreadsheet.
Was there a column for brand? Like, is there a way to divvy out like which products belong to which brands?
No, I can't remember the format too well. I think it was just like the title, the quantity that they had, and like, other stuff like price per unit, price per case, etc. Nothing, no UPCs, none of that stuff.
Okay, and so those are the best kind of lists, right? So I say that it's easier to source a price list that has like a column for brand, like that's going to make it much easier. But the fact that it didn't have that, so it was kind of hard to probably sort the list by brand, and the fact that it didn't have a column for UPC, like me myself personally, when I started in wholesale, I made a huge mistake. The first 2 years, I didn't even, if the supplier couldn't give me a price list with UPCs on it, I just skipped to the next supplier. I was like, oh, if I can't easily upload this price list to a UPC scanner and have it do the work for me, then I'm not going to spend the time to source it, which, as you know, huge mistake. Like I probably missed out on literally 7 figures in buys in the first 2 years from just avoiding suppliers like that. So you saw that list, you saw that there was no UPC column. And instead of thinking like, oh, I can't feed this through a scanner, right? You're like, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to manually source as much of this as I can to find the winners. And so you said the 4 or 5 products that you found, a couple of them were 80% ROI. And yes, while that's not typical for wholesale, it is like it's doable in wholesale. Like we carry plenty of products where the ROI is that high. And I guarantee you that the reason the ROI is so high there is because that spreadsheet was hard to source, because you had to go in and manually pull those out, right?
Yeah, my general rule of thumb is if it's harder to source, it's long-term more profitable. And
every time.
Yeah.
Every single time. I mean, I'm telling you, like when we open a new account and the supplier either says like, hey, sorry, we don't have a price list, we only have prices on our website, right? And I go on their website and it's literally just like, one page with like 10,000 products on the page. So it's basically like a price list with no UPCs. I love that because I know like, oh, my team is going to put in the time to pull out some really good leads out of this website when I know that 99% of other sellers that have opened this account before took one look at that website and they're like, hell no, like I'm not spending the time to go through that.
Yeah, exactly, for sure.
And this supplier, do you mind sharing like what category they were in?
So like when it comes to my niche, sorry, I just got off a sickness, so I'm
You're good.
coughing like crazy. But a lot of it was non-discretionary items, so like, grocery, cleaning products, that sort of things. That's mainly what I bought, like facial, makeup, beauty, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Got it. Nice. And so this supplier, when you reached out to them, did they ask if you sold on Amazon? Did they say like, oh, sorry, you're e-commerce, we don't want to work with you? Like, what did that conversation look like when you went to land that account?
So mine was pretty different compared to what everybody else experiences because it got referred to me through a friend. So I was like, hey, I know my friend's name, and they're like, oh yeah, we know about him. We're just gonna send you like his pricing and his catalog. So I kind of got to jump over all those kind of questions, but yeah.
Cool. So that's, again, that goes to show that like having friends or just generally communicating and networking with people in the business gives you opportunities like this, right? And now that's not to say that like I'm not going to just give a supplier lead to some, new seller that asked me for it, but there are plenty of people out there, right, that will, right? And the reason that guy probably gave you that lead is because, I mean, you said you're close to them, but one, like maybe he didn't think that you would take the time to like really go through it and find products and compete with him. But even if you did, the chances of you staying in stock and like being very competitive with him on those specific listings is small. So he realizes like, hey, one, like my supplier is probably going to like me even more for this because I just gave them a new customer. Two, I'm helping out a newer seller who this can be kind of like their gateway into the business model, right? Which clearly it was. And then three, like now I'm sure you probably feel indebted to him in some way. So like you're probably going to pay it back to him in the form of, sharing a lead with him or sharing another supplier with him or doing something to kind of return the favor, right?
Yeah, for sure. It was like a win-win for both of us because there was a really high MOQ on it, and so he couldn't really fulfill it, and so that's where I stepped in and we kind of like put our orders together. And so, I mean, he and I kind of like negotiate about our pricing and stuff. That way we can both share profits. So
I love that. And that's something that I've talked a lot about in my content is like doing group buys, right? Especially when the MOQ from the supplier is prohibitively high for one person. Well, at that point, it becomes a thought process of, well, either I'm just going to let this order slip and I'm not going to make any money, or I could bring in a friend or two. We could split this order 2 or 3 ways, and we can most likely get a better price than I could have gotten on my own because now we're spending 3 times the money. And then 2, now I am able to monetize this opportunity, right? And so it sounds almost like you and your friend kind of present a united front to the supplier saying like, hey, this is what we want. This is what our combined order is going to look like. And so because of that, you probably get better pricing, you probably get special treatment, and that sales rep probably sends you guys opportunities that he doesn't send to other people because he knows that you guys are serious and you're ready to pull the trigger. Is that fair?
yeah, that also happens in our Discord group a lot. Like usually there's we got a wholesale leader, if that makes sense. And so he kind of comes in, he gives the catalog. He's like, okay, who wants? And so he'll make like groups of 5. They all pool their money together and they just add it all up together and place the order.
Nice. Yeah, I've been doing some of that in my Discord as well, and it's been going great, right? And another thing that we've been doing, or I guess that I've been doing with one other seller in particular, is even at trade shows, right? Like at this particular trade show, we went to ASD back in, I guess, August.
Yeah.
Him and we were going to booths together, right? And we were presenting a united front saying like, hey, him and I together, we combined for, $10 million per year in sales. We have X amount of spending power ready. These are the types of brands that we've sold before. These are the types of brands that we're interested in. So we're there. We know what we want. We're not just kind of like fishing for a good lead. And then we're saying to the supplier, like, what opportunities do you have that we can both collaborate on where we could spend 40, 50, 60, 70K right now, right? Because if we were just going up to that booth, one of us at a time, it's like, okay, maybe I could spend 25 or 30. Maybe he could spend the same amount. But when we combine, then the supplier takes us both a lot more seriously. We both open an account. We both get in their good graces a lot easier, right?
Yeah, of course. I hear what you're saying.
So let's talk about some of the, so you're talking about in the Discord group that you're in, right? You guys, or I guess some other people in the group, they kind of combine their funds to place orders together. What does that look like? I'm just curious kind of how other groups do it. So you said you guys have like a wholesale leader. Is he the person that he has the account with the supplier and then he has the price list and he kind of just puts the price list on the group and people almost like place their orders from that list?
Yeah, so he'll get like groups of 5 and pretty much exactly what you explained. So he has a supplier. He's like, he'll send out the like spreadsheet to the 5. They'll kind of source it on their own and kind of give in their orders to Joe, and then they'll wire him the money and then he'll wire it to the supplier. And so he has a sorry, he has a prep center of his own. So he'll prep all the items for them and then he'll just get them shipped out to the warehouses.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Cause that's how I do it as well. So like when I do group buys with my group, I do it to where it's like lead comes to me, I present it to my group, whoever's interested, it's like they wire me first. So I have all the funds and then I turn around and wire one order to the supplier. Supplier invoices me and then I turn around and invoice my group. And then if there ever were to be an issue where, let's say one of the buyers in my group, they needed an invoice, right, from their supplier, which in this case would be my supplier, then I have no problem presenting that invoice, right? Because they were in the loop on the deal the whole time. So I think that's probably the best way to go about doing it. At least in my experience, it is. Again, if somebody watching this kind of has another way that they go about conducting group buys, I'd be curious to hear in the comments below. But that seems like it's just a good way to get a lot of people involved. Because again, it's like when you combine forces like that, you're spending more with the supplier. And I mean, typically these group buys are going down with distributors or with wholesalers, and all they care about is how much you're going to spend and how often you're going to spend it. So really your friend Joe, the one that's kind of organizing those group buys, that distributor probably loves Joe, and he probably gets all the deals, all the leads before they go to anybody else. And he can then either, I'm sure he's probably marking them up slightly to, passing them on to the group, or maybe he's just making money on the prep. But either way, he can kind of offer like that, those discounts and those deals can kind of trickle down to people in the group, right?
Yeah, of course. And even then it's nice because there's actually really not that many of us. There's about 20 active guys. So we're always just constantly talking, like you said, quality over quantity. So
right, for sure. And I mean, that's something too, where, I mean, there's been opportunities that have come across my desk. I mean, this happened a month or so ago. A wholesaler sent me a deal, and it was a great deal on a product that that we currently carried. We bought it before. It was the same price, which is a great price. What I could have easily done is marked it up, 50 cents, $1 per unit, send it to somebody else and taken a small profit. But instead, I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to put this wholesaler in touch directly with my friend, right? Which most people would think is blasphemy. It's like, oh, you're giving up essentially one of your best suppliers. But it's like, well, I am, but I trust my friend. I know that he's not going to like screw me over. If anything, he's probably going to want to rope me into future deals with this specific supplier because I've been the one that made the connection. So one, I'm doing my friend a favor. Two, the supplier now loves me because my friend in that particular arrangement, my friend placed, I think it was like an $89,000 order with this guy for one SKU. And so that supplier messaged me and said, hey man, like, thank you so much for connecting me with this guy. Great buyer. He's a good communicator. Like, let me know what you need. I got X, Y, and Z coming in the next couple of weeks. Like, I'll send it your way. I'm like, perfect. Right. So even though I didn't monetarily benefit on that specific deal, and a lot of people would have never done that, I feel like that was the best long-term play by far, because now I've got a really good supplier in my good graces who almost feels like he owes me one. And then same thing with a friend, right, who I did a favor, who again is now going to essentially pay that back, I'm sure, many times over.
yeah, exactly. I can see that. It's sort of like the short-term benefit like isn't there, but long-term it's going to build on itself. So
yeah, no doubt. And so just curious, I know you said you're down there in Atlanta, you're in college, you're there in your dorm room. How many people like around you there in college are into this type of thing? Like, is this one of the things where you're just like, you're kind of on an island by yourself?
yeah, pretty much. I mean, I'm only a freshman, but I try to talk to as many people as I can. But I mean, I know people who have like small businesses like here and there, but nah, I haven't really met anybody yet. I wish I could though.
Yeah. I mean, you'll probably run into some people like, does your school have an entrepreneurship club?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, you should think about joining that. I don't think my school had one. But I mean, I didn't start this business until like right after college graduation. But really towards like the end of my senior year is when I started heavily researching this stuff. So I was like, I'm at the end of my senior year. I'm just going to enjoy it. I don't really have any money to spend on inventory, but I'm going to absorb all the information that I can. And so I like to take action. So I'm like, okay, well, if I don't really have the capital to start on Amazon right away, then I'm going to start just like flipping stuff on Marketplace or flipping stuff on eBay. So what I was doing kind of casually there towards the end of senior year is I would like research Amazon kind of my spare time. And then I would also be buying stuff off Marketplace and flipping it on eBay. Primarily just like video games, like, older video games like
Yeah.
GameCubes, PS1s. Like I'm sure, a lot of that stuff is coming back and does really well. So, and part of that too is because like none of my college friends, I mean, some of them were into business, but like nobody was like had a business going, right? Nobody kind of like had side hustles. It was like,
same element, yeah.
yeah, it's like, you get a job during summer, you make as much as you can, and then you come back to school and you spend it all. And like, that's fine.
I think part of it too is this is a pretty rigorous college. So people are always like just stacked up on work. There's very little time to dedicate towards business. That's sort of what I'm worried about. That's why I kind of just want to scale it up, put my systems in place, and they're going to be, how you were saying, like you don't work too much, like 3-4 hours a day or something like that. So I want to get to that point if I can as well. So.
Well, having a really good prep center is going to be key there, right? So, I mean, you're down there in Atlanta. There, like our main prep center is down there, and they're in Savannah, Georgia. We've got a couple, really just like a couple that we could work with on the East Coast, a couple we could work with on the West Coast, one in Oregon. But really, again, prep centers are like a dime a dozen. So finding an actual good one is going to be the hard part. But I mean, you've got your friend doing your prep for you, right? So it sounds like that's a solid relationship.
Private prep center too.
Nice. Well, what are your plans for scaling? Like where do you see yourself going from here?
I think so sorry.
You're good.
I think as of right now, it's really all about like cash flow. Like I'm always just constantly kind of running out of cash, especially when it comes to wholesale orders, because I mean, these are no like small orders. I mean, maybe to you they're small orders, but for me they're big. But it's like 1,500, 2,000. I mean, you can only do, at least with the cash that I have, I can only do about 2-3 orders. So, and I mean, it takes a long time for the cash to run back, especially when you have to sell everything. So yeah, scaling, I think number one, that's sort of in place. And two is system implementation. So I'm kind of doing this whole business on my own other than the prep center. So all the sourcing, all the bookkeeping, I mean, that's pretty normal, but I think there needs to be a point where I need to pass some of those tasks on to like get my time back, like we were talking about earlier. Mm-hmm. So like hire a VA, but for now I'm just gonna kind of keep doing it on my own. But I don't really have a plan on like when I would make that transition yet, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're only a freshman, right? So your workload, I'm sure, is going to be picking up here over the next couple of years. I mean, my advice would be, I mean, like you said, you kind of have a capital crunch, right? And as a college student, I wouldn't recommend you take out all these loans or leverage credit cards in some crazy way. If anything, if I were you, I would shoot to grow slow but steady, right? So if I don't know how much like revenue you're doing right now, and it's really not so much about revenue, but more so I would be focused on like weekly or monthly spend, because that's going to be directly correlated to your revenue, right? Like that's going to be a lead measure that's going to determine your revenue. So if you're spending, let's just say I'm making these numbers up because I don't know what you're spending, but let's say you're doing $500 a week right now in wholesale inventory. Well, I would look to basically be slowly increasing that amount over time, so that, I mean, let's say you're midway through your sophomore year next year, and now you're spending $1,500 or $2,000 a week. And not because you injected more cash into the business, but because you have reinvested everything. Like I really wouldn't be taking much money out right now. And, you're slowly growing it profitably, and you're putting those systems in place to keep scaling. Like that would be my advice, so that by the time you graduate as a senior, you might have either a business that's generating a lot of cash flow for you, or if you, I mean, again, who knows what could happen if you wanted to take a different direction. If you get a job, if you start a different business, if you do something else, now you've got this inventory worth a lot of money that you can liquidate, and you can take that cash and do something with.
Yeah, exactly. And at the end of the day, this business is all for fun for me. Like I'm going to take it serious, obviously, but at the end of the day, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But I mean, I'm just gonna take it as far as I can go. So.
Well, good stuff, man. Well, that's what I would do as well. And again, if you need advice or anything, hit me up. You've got my email. So we've only got about another minute or so. Do you have any final questions or anything else before we run?
Not as of right now. I'm just gonna keep listening, keep learning as much as I can, and see what happens from there. So.
Cool. Well, good stuff. So anybody that watched this on YouTube, where can they connect with you? Because I think the key to your success going forward is going to be continuing to grow your network of other sellers and continuing to get out there. So I don't know if you're on Twitter yet, but you should be on Twitter. That's where all the Amazon sellers hang out. So where can people connect with you if they're watching this on YouTube?
They can connect with me on Instagram. I have an Instagram called Julian FBA. It has like a little, I think the icon's like a little Bitmoji. You'll see what it's like a little chef. I don't know how to explain it.
No spaces or anything?
No spaces.
Awesome. Well, good stuff, man. I hope that helped. Stay in touch and best of luck to you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right. See you, man.
Take care.